Hi everybody, and welcome to this special webinar featuring Australia's foremost educator on the subject of how to do property renovations well, Bernadette Janson. I think this webinar is very timely because real estate markets are undergoing major change around Australia. Prices are no longer rising strongly in our two biggest cities, but growth markets in other parts of the country. But it does raise the question of what strategy property investors can use to create growth in markets when prices are no longer growing strongly. One of the best possibilities is a renovation strategy. Even when your local market is in a downturn phase, you can create your own growth through a renovation strategy that's done well. And that's the key thing. It needs to be done well. You have to get it right. And nobody knows more about getting a renovation strategy right than Bernadette Janson from the School of Renovating. So Bernadette, welcome.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks for having me.
So over to you, really, for your presentation. I've been to a number of your events. I've heard you speak at live seminars as well as webinars like these, and always found it really fascinating, and particularly your incredible attention to detail and the importance of that in working through a renovation strategy.
Beautiful. So thank you, Terry, and thanks everyone for being on this webinar on an afternoon. So I really, appreciate that. I know it's quite a significant time commitment. So I'm going to ensure that I give you great value. So I'm going to be talking about renovating to create your own growth. Some of the things I'll be covering is, getting set up right, getting on the right track, getting your strategy straight, and of course research, which is something that we really rely on Terry quite heavily for, and I'll talk a bit more as we get in. Renovating to grow equity, renovating to grow cash flow, renovating to produce your first deposit, and some other renovating tips. So I'll get into that straight away. So this might seem like it's obvious, but you would be surprised how many people decide to improve their financial position through property and go to a seminar, buy a property, and end up in a worse position than when they started. So getting the strategy and getting the skills and getting the right research is essential. So on the strategy and skill side, that's where we work. So basically, we have a lot of renovation strategies, and really it's not a one-size-fits-all. So everyone has different circumstances, they have different assets to sort of make the most of, and they have different financial positions. And so what will work for one will not work for another. And there is a saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And if you don't get this clear, then you can end up going down a rabbit hole and spending years thinking that you're, getting results when in actual fact you're spending a lot of it marking time. So that's really important. The second thing, and I'm sure you know that because you're in Terry's cohort, is research is absolutely critical. We look on it as the insurance policy. Now, how you do that research depends on the strategy that you choose. So in terms of if you are, what your investment strategy is, will really govern how you go about that. I personally believe that nobody can be really good at everything. Okay, so you have your strengths, and so that's why I like to outsource the things that I'm weak on. And in terms of research, I do my own 5-kilometre area, but if I move outside that, then I am definitely going to be working with Terry's reports. And so I think that if you're doing that already, you have a huge advantage. Okay, so renovating to grow equity. So when the market is not rising rapidly or not rising at all. In some areas it's still rising, in others it's subsiding, in others it's levelling out. You want to look at what you can do to improve your position so you can get to the next step. Whenever we go into a property, we're looking at how that's going to play out and whether we can move on to the next step. Because if we buy into a property and it puts us in a holding pattern and we can't move on, then it's going to be one of those things that sort of takes us off the rails. So that's the important thing. The great thing about renovating is you get to power up capital growth with your renovation. And if there's no capital growth, then you're producing capital growth for yourself. The other great thing is you can take advantage of depreciation rules that recently, or last year, put investors on the back foot. So in terms of being able to depreciate the plant and equipment, renovators are still able to do that because they're the ones actually putting the plant and equipment in. Whereas if you buy something that's already renovated, then you don't have that privilege. And the third thing is to grow your capacity so that you can move on to the next one. So I'm going to be giving you lots of examples of the types of renos that I'm doing and that people in our community are doing. So just before we go on, I've been a pretty a serial flipper for a long time. So for many years, that was my means of income. I didn't have a job. I just bought, renovated and sold. But I actually bought this property to hold because I wanted a property where we were going to downsize to. And while I wasn't sure that we're going to live in it, I thought I'll renovate it to increase the cash flow so it's not taking money out of our pocket, and then see what happens. So when I bought it, it was in a pretty bad state. So I spent almost 10% of the property value improving it so I could rent it out. But as a result of that, I produced a much higher rental income. So it went from $1,200 a week to $1,770 per week, and put it into a positive cash flow situation in inner Sydney. So, which is unheard of. So that's the power of renovating. But whereas I would normally have, on other projects, I would have at that point sold it and I would have probably made around about a 10% profit. This one, obviously, I didn't sell because I was holding on to it. And every year I've owned that property, it has delivered at least $200,000 in capital growth. So there's a few principles that we follow in terms of buying property, and this property really embodies those principles working at their best. So buy in an area that's set to grow. And while there are a lot of areas in Australia that are plummeting is probably not the word, but they are subsiding, there are other areas that are just ramping up, and your work with Terry would inform you of that. And so make sure that if you're buying property, you buy it that's in a place that it's set to grow. Do a renovation, and I'll talk more about the renovation, so it not only increases the property value, but most importantly increases the cash flow. And hold on to it and just enjoy the benefits of both those value adds. Now, this is a property that one of our students completed. So she bought in an area. Once again, she uses Terry's research to choose an area. This was in Belmont. She bought it for $300,000. She did quite a good renovation on it, and I'll talk more about the reno in a minute. She increased the value of it by $70,000. So after she'd finished, she had it revalued at $430,000. But she also used a high cash flow strategy to increase the cash flow. So had it been in a traditional rental situation, it would have produced $320 a week, but she's getting just over $700 a week after her leasing costs, I guess you would say. So one of the things you need to think about when you're thinking about a renovation is how can you power it up? So paint and new kitchen and new bathrooms are great, and they definitely add value, but how can you take it up exponentially? And one of the things, one of the ways of doing that is to increase the bedroom count. But if you have to extend to do that, do an addition, then often the cost of it will sort of eat away at the value. or at the return on investment. However, if you're able to do it within the footprint, then obviously that's quite an effective way to create extra growth. So this property had a third bedroom, but it was under a stairway, so it was really pokey and could only fit a single bed in. And so they actually took a wall out to expand it to create a full double bedroom. And so their research informed them of what that would add in terms of value. And so that was a great way to power up the renovation. So, you know, of course, you really do have to manage your costs. You can't, unfortunately, just go in and spend what needs to be spent. You need to be quite creative about it. One of the things that they did, which is I thought was really clever, was they created a deck out of pallets, okay? So thinking outside the square to get the result you want without spending the money. Bathroom on a shoestring, that's absolutely essential. Bathrooms are key in terms of renovating and adding value. You know, you don't have to strip all the tiles out to renovate a bathroom. If the tiles are sound, often you can actually lay tiles over them. But in doing that, you need to check that at the taps and the power points that they will cope with the extra thickness of the tiles. Of course, spraying bathrooms is quite common. You just need to be careful with spraying. Often if you're spraying over an embossed tile, it will look quite tacky. And so you want to think about that. If you're spraying, always spray in white, because if you do it in a colour, then the grout line is a colour as well, and it's a dead giveaway and it looks really strange. Keep your cost to a minimum by not doing custom-made items. Try and design your reno to suit off-the-shelf products, including the shower screen, the vanity, the taps, everything, and that will help to keep your costs down. Another thing about spraying your bathroom is make sure that you're using a product that has a guarantee. So we use Thermoglaze. And it's not just paint, it's an epoxy product, so it'll come with a guarantee. But the great thing about spraying is you save so much cost, so you're not having to re-waterproof, and so you can get a really beautiful functional kitchen with not a lot of cost. So here's the kitchen. So flat pack kitchens are fantastic because for a couple of reasons, but the main reason is there's no lead time on it. If you want to get a kitchen in quickly, you're not having to wait 2, 3 or 4 weeks to get your kitchen done. The key with putting a flat pack in, so the difference between a flat pack and a custom made is that the flat pack has to fit to your dimensions, and you will end up with gaps because, you know, the wall won't be exactly the right size for your joinery. And so how you deal with those gaps makes a difference between a nicely renovated property and something that looks a bit dodgy. So if someone's putting a new kitchen in, you're spending a bit of money, you want to make sure that you get the outcome you're looking for, and you don't get something that looks like it's been really slapped together. So this is another property that demonstrates the value of those steps that I talked about, making sure that you buy in an area that's set to grow. This couple lived in Sydney. They're sort of in their 30s wanting to get ahead. They bought a pair of terraces in Newcastle about 3 years ago now, and renovated both of them. So they're both renovated. So they live in one side and they list the other side on Airbnb. So they've made, on the first one, they made about $500,000 in increased equity. That was through capital growth as well as the reno. And the second one is more. So they've really set them up by using those principles of making sure that they bought in an area that was set to grow, renovating to increase the cash flow and the value of it, and using a high cash flow strategy to propel them along. They've since done 2 or 3 projects. They've just got one on the market now. So tips for renovating an investment property. So you want to minimise your spend. So keep that between 5 and 10% of the value of the property. Now, if you're going to be spending 10%, I'd want to see some major sort of uplift on the value. So I want to see you be creating an extra bedroom or doing something, or putting a deck on, doing something that's going to really increase the value of it. Don't just spend 10% because that's the range. That assumes that you are going to produce more value. Renovate to minimise maintenance. Now this is a really important factor in your renovation, because if you're keeping something for a long time, the maintenance can eat away at your cash flow. So little things like when you're wiring up the bathroom, wire the exhaust fan into the lighting circuit. So when you do that, it means that whenever the light goes on for someone to use the bathroom, the exhaust fan has to go on too. So, you know, anyone that's had problems with a bathroom moulding up, that is like a very effective way of solving that problem. So after you've spent money, you know, stripping off the mouldy paint off the ceiling and treating it and repainting it, you do not want to come back and find mould growing there again. So make sure the exhaust fan gets wired into the lighting circuit. You know, other things like when you are installing external doors, make sure that they are painted underneath. So under the bottom edge of the door, make sure that gets painted and sealed properly. It won't be done unless you make sure that it's done, because, you know, we love our tradies, but they, you know, a lot of them do skip things if they can get away with it. But if you don't, then when the weather comes in, the bottom of the door, because it's end grain, will act like a wick, and it'll suck all the water up, and it'll mean that the door will rot out a lot quicker. And the third thing is to really understand your tenant and what they need. So I always suggest to our students to go and have a chat to their managing agent to just get a feel for the types of things your tenant might be looking for. You know, it might be that they like to have pets, so you'll look at making the house pet proof. And because what that'll do is it will increase your chances of getting a good tenant that's going to stay a long time, because they'll be concerned about leaving for fear that they won't be able to find another property like yours. You know, I had one student who was renovating a property that they'd had for a long time, and it was quite run down. And when they went and spoke to the agent suggested that they had a big window in the main living area, that they put a plantation shutter on that window. Now, I was curious about this because I thought that was quite a big spend on an investment property, but it absolutely paid off, because they, you know, really pushed their the return, the rent, increased rent up significantly, like, you know, almost a couple of $100 a week, because it had that wow factor, and that agent had known what people really love. So really work with your managing agent to help you to understand the tenant, so that you can put things in that they're going to be wanting and willing to pay for. Now, this is a little bit left field, but I'm loving this strategy, and I've got lots of students doing this, so I wanted to share this with you. So it's adding a land component to power up your reno. So I've had so many students doing this, I've actually had to go and buy one myself, and I just saw that for the first time on Friday. And so what we call them are the 3 S's. So it's splitters, sliders and subdivision. Now, splitters and sliders are mainly in Queensland, or sliders are only in Queensland, splitters are mainly in Queensland, subdivision you can do anywhere. But just buying something with a little bit of a land component as well. So, you know, often an investor might look at buying an apartment, which if you renovate it, you know, you might be able to increase the value for, you know, maybe up to 10%. But it's got no more potential. So then you just sit there and pay it off for, you know, however long it takes. However, if you can buy something that's got more potential, and a land component is a great way to do that, then you can do a couple of things. But, you know, one of the things you can do is actually pay off, sell off that land component when you've split it off, and use that to pay down your debt. Or you can build something on that land and double up your equity. So think a bit outside the square. So this is the property that I'm talking about. So it's a house on an 800 square metre block in, I think it's West Wynnum or Wynnum West, in Queensland. And so the purchase price was $651,000. So I'm planning to renovate it to sell because I'm on another strategy. But there you go. But this is a great demonstration of what you can do. Reno 40,000, development 60,000. So the development's just the case of realigning the boundary, because this was originally a splitter. For those of you who don't know what splitters are, currently after the war, the Queensland government did a 2-for-1 deal where people who bought blocks of land actually got two. Most of them built the house over the boundary. So if you buy one of those and you want to separate them off, you have to move the house. And this one was the same, but of course it's brick, we can't move the house. But you can see it's got that great block at the back. Okay, so if I was buying this for my portfolio, what I would do is sell off the block of land at the back, put that money into the house, so I really lowered my debt and had a really low LVR, and renovate the house to hold. Just to give you an idea of the property, it's very beautiful. I think 1940s vintage. So I will be renovating this property, and so in this room it will be predominantly cosmetic renovation. You can see on the right hand side there's a porch which I'm planning to remove because it breaks the flow of the property. The property is quite small, so I need to maximise the space. The kitchen, unfortunately the kitchen has 4 doors into it. So I need to figure out a way of overcoming that problem. You know, the flow of the floor plan is really important, not just the way it looks. And so we need to work on improving the floor plan. So beautiful bedroom, that'll be predominantly cosmetic. And so just to give you an idea of the figures, So I apologise, I've got an error there. So the land sale will be $375 and the renovated house sale will be $580. So if you were buying that as an investor, you could, either sell the house and build on the land and hold on to that property, or you could sell the land and put that money into the house and hold on to that property. There's a multitude of options in terms of that sort of property. So at the moment, that property's got between 90 and 100,000. So that's in profit in it. So you could do lots of things to make the most of that profit. So some tips for adding a land component. So rigorous due diligence is absolutely essential. So obviously, if you're adding an extra strategy to your reno, that will also add some risk. So, you want to know exactly what you are in for in terms of costs and time frame to be able to do that. So what I did is actually paid for a pre-DA meeting prior to going unconditional, which cost a bit of money to do, but to make sure that council would allow me to do what I was planning to do. So because that's very important, otherwise I would have paid quite a lot of money for something that I couldn't, a project that I couldn't actually resolve properly. The next thing to do is if you're time poor or it's out of area, you're not, you don't live in the location, you can't get there, then I strongly suggest you outsource the buying of your property. That's definitely what I do, and I use the buyer's agent to source this. There's a couple of advantages to that. So the one is that it reduces the risk because you've got someone that is familiar with the area and can help you to work through the due diligence. But the second one is that it helps you speed up your process. So, you know, I see people that make a decision to, you know, buy a property, or they've got this path that they've plotted out for themselves, and they find it really hard to find a property, and, you know, can spend 6 or 12 months looking for the right property for their strategy. So that, you know, that is, you know, you may not be losing money on it, but you're certainly losing the opportunity. You know, my view is spend a few thousand, have someone find the property for you so you can get into it straight away. So in that 6 months, I'm making 90 or 100,000 in increased equity. I can get on and do the next one quicker than hanging around waiting to see if I can find a bargain myself. And I'm telling you that really skilled professionals will find bargains that you can't find. So most of the properties we buy are off market, and that's because I work with people that you know, have really close relationships with the agents in their area and get the deals before anyone else does. And the next thing is to manage the time frame and the numbers really closely. We use benchmarks to manage our budgets so that we can get a feel for the viability of a project. We have established benchmarks for each strategy, so that helps us to manage the numbers. Okay, so that last point relates to every single strategy, because, you know, if you don't manage your time frame, your money goes down the drain in holding costs. Renovating to grow cash flow. So this is something that we really, really love. So what I'm talking about here is high cash flow strategies to reduce your holding costs, to make your property cash flow positive, and predominantly short-term rental, which is Airbnb stays, booking.com, and affordable accommodation. So it could be share accommodation, student accommodation, and in New South Wales we have a fabulous legislation called New Generation Boarding House. So if you buy, like a lot of people fund their investment properties by taking some money from the equity in their own home, using that as a deposit and for the buying costs and a little reno, and then getting a loan for the purchase of the property. And that's certainly how I've operated for 30 years. But the problem with it is, on traditional leasing, almost every property bought that way will be negatively geared for a period of time. And so that's going to take money out of your pocket and slow you down to, you know, from where you're trying to get. So by using a high cash flow strategy, you will be able to get that cash flow up so that it's cash flow positive, and so that you can move much quicker. I personally think that anyone that's interested in renovating must have short-term rental, or it is referred to as Airbnb, but Airbnb is just one platform, short-term rental in their toolbox, because it's incredibly powerful. So when we buy a property now, first thing we do is it goes straight on short-term rental. Of course, you need to, in your due diligence, you need to check that that's allowable if it's an apartment and you're in you're answering to an owner's corporation. But what that does is it stops you from bleeding money while you're, getting your act together. And sometimes it takes a while to get a project plan up and running. I'm curious to know if anyone on the call does have negatively geared properties, because these strategies I'm going to be talking to you about now, you want to be thinking about them for your negatively geared properties, because, negative gearing is just such a noose around your neck. I had a student contact me recently. Her mum had gone into care and she decided to buy her mum's home. And so she paid $580,000 for it. And she was asking me about, you know, the type of renovation she was going to do. And I said, before you even think about renovating it, you actually have to think about what you're going to do about cash flow, because she would have barely got $500 a week for it. And by the time she'd paid all the costs, she would be in negative cash flow territory. So she made the decision to do share accommodation, but not for students, for professionals. And as a result, that's increased her cash flow to around about $800 a week. Now, there are a few things that you need to do when you are doing this. So one of the things that you need to be aware of is that according to the building code, any property that has more than 3 unrelated people, you need to increase the building classification. There's just a few things that you need to do around the safety of the property, the fire safety, and to be able to do that. But that's important to know, and that forms part of your renovation. So obviously your renovation will be slightly different on this type of property as opposed to a long-term lease. So let's start with Airbnb. This was the property that I discovered Airbnb on quite a few years ago now. We had done a renovation on it, and funny story, my labourer had drilled through the main hot water service to 48 units in the building. It's probably not a great advertisement for renovating, but anyhow, he did, and shut down the whole building. And so the project went over time, and you know, it took a bit to come back from that. And so I was looking at it thinking, okay, so I need to do something to boot this along because it's, you know, got an issue. And so what I did was decided to try Airbnb. So it was only fairly new on the horizon. So I listed it for the settlement period. So we were selling it. I was doing an experiment to test how cheap I could go in property purchase and still make a profit. And so I listed it on Airbnb on a Sunday afternoon prior to the auction on Tuesday for the month of settlement. And within 24 hours, it was completely full. And I thought I was so terribly clever because it was completely full so quickly. And I now realise that means I left a lot of money on the table, but that's okay. So at this point, the property was worth around about, I'd spent around about $400,000 on it. So I sold it for $435,000, but it brought in over that month $850 per week. So just showing you the payout from Airbnb there. As you can see, that's a really simple renovation. And you can see in that photo, so when I'm talking about making sure that you design for off the shelf, pretty much everything in this bathroom I bought on eBay. So you can't see on the left, I've got a heated towel rail. That basin was a particular format to work with the issue I had in that bathroom. The shower screen, that came off eBay, and I just got my builder to install it. So very cost-effective renovation just by really managing the design of the property so I could buy off the shelf. But just looking at the impact that increased return has when you're paying off an investment property. So if I had leased it on long term, I would have got about $450 a week. Instead, I was getting $850, so that produced an extra $450 per week. Now, over a 30-year loan, if I was to add that extra $400 into the repayments, I would reduce the loan by 18 years, and I would reduce the interest by $233,000. So that, I think that's massive, and that's the power of short-term rental. Since then, I have had lots of properties on short-term rental, and we're currently playing with a different strategy, which I'll share with you in a minute. One of the things you need to know is 1% of the hosts make 20% of the income, and a good host makes 20 times more income than an ordinary host. Like every man and his dog's on Airbnb, but there are not many people making serious money out of it. So putting some effort into your listing, marketing and hosting skills is well worthwhile. So, in terms of the types of property, so on the right-hand side, this lady had this property in Port Melbourne, it was about 20 years old. She decided to give it a makeover, which she did, but it really was just styling. She hardly did any reno. But she styled it for a luxury market. So the thing is, you want to pitch to the market that you want to sell to. So as a result, that property probably would, I'm just plucking, she hasn't told me this, but I'm pretty sure she would have been getting about $700, maybe $800 a week for it. It's a 3-bedroom townhouse, but she gets, on weekends, she gets $450 a night, and on weekdays, she gets $300. So the weekends are fully booked. The weekdays, she has some gaps, but she is well ahead of the mark with that property. So on the left-hand side, this is a single room, also in Port Melbourne, and this is to demonstrate different properties, different markets. This is a room in an apartment, so it's just a private room. And this gets $70 a night. So the market for this property is people getting the Spirit of Tasmania to Hobart, or to Launceston, Devonport, I'll get it right eventually. And so they have set that up for people who are coming for an overnight stay before they go on on their holiday. And so extra cash flow, helps for a multitude of things, and certainly helps you to build your capacity in your investment journey. This is another student who has this property in Chippendale. So she has one short-term rental property, this one, which she's renovated. So obviously she's renovated to a particular market, and so that's producing $25,000 cash flow per year. She also has another property which is an affordable accommodation house, and she's producing another $32,000. So those two properties, $57,000 in cash flow, have enabled her to cut back to part-time work. So the other great thing, and we're a little bit off renovating, but I want to tell you about this because it's awesome. So another thing about short-term rental is that you don't even have to own your property. So if you're trying to save for a deposit, and it's taking time, so you can actually rent a property to list on short-term rental. So this is one we've just recently rented. It's a 2-bedroom terrace in Surrey Hills. We've rented that for $700 a week. So, of course, we do really rigorous research to make sure to minimise our risk. But there is a fabulous tool called AirDNA, which, you can pretty much plot your potential income down to the dollar. That's what we use to research the potential of a property. So this property will take 6 months to repay the setup, and then after that 6 months, it will be paying us around $25,000 per year in cash flow. We have a student in Brisbane who has, they say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So there's a problem in Brisbane in terms of the CBD units. A lot of units are, struggling to get decent rent. Their values have dropped. So she's gone into one building and she's negotiated her way through that building, and now has 11 properties, rented 11 properties in one building in the inner city of Brisbane, and she's generating $250,000 in cash flow per year. So, fabulous strategy. The next one is affordable. Tell you about another property. This is a property that I am currently developing. When I bought it, the long-term rent was something like $450 a week. And so, of course, I listed it on short-term accommodation. It's been on that for about 3 years. And this slide explains the value of working on your skills. It takes 250 reviews for a property to reach its potential. So the first month I put it on, I got $1,750 per month, which is around about what I would have got on long term. And 12 months later, the same month, I got nearly $7,000. Okay, so there's definite advantages in taking that strategy seriously. So there it is. That's the property. It's very beautiful. It's currently returning $40,000 per year. And my next step with that is to build affordable housing using the new generation boarding house legislation. So what I'll be building is micro apartments. Okay, so they're not you know, shared rooms. They're actually apartments like a modern day studio. That strategy adds around about $100,000 cash flow to that property. So fabulous result. This is another student in St Lucia in Queensland. So she wanted to charge up her cash flow. She bought a 2-bedder. Now, when you are renovating a property for traditional leasing, or any type of property, you really need to balance out the bedroom count to the number of bathrooms and the space in the living area. So if you say you carve up the living area to create an extra bedroom, that will add value unless you've carved it up so much that the living room is too small to support the number of bedrooms in the property, okay? However, when you're looking at affordable accommodation, the name of the game is to not have big common areas, because if people are forced to socialise together, you will increase the risk of conflict. So in order to have harmony in the property and also to maximise your return, by turning the big living area, most of it, into an extra bedroom, that's increased the cash flow of this property and it's decreased the risk of having problems. So this is it's in Brisbane, in St Lucia. So Brisbane has a policy for a rooming house policy, which is, I think it's the only state that does, so that you can have shared accommodation. And so there are a few steps you need to go through as well in terms of increasing the building classification, and also it will need to be registered with residential services so that they can monitor the property. But, you know, it's worth the effort because the return is so much better. So one of the things that you may or may not know is that this is predominantly for students. Sorry, I should mention that if it's student accommodation, more than 80%, you don't have to register with residential services. So this is for students. And one of the things about students is they're not all poor. So they will pay, particularly overseas students, will pay a decent amount of money for a decent place to live. And I think the key here is that it's decent, so that it's renovated really well, still the same attention to detail, not having a mindset, oh, this is just a share house, I'm just going to do a slap-up job. You know, these people are just like you and I, they really want to have somewhere decent to live. And so by delivering that, then you will reap the rewards. Tips for renovating to grow cash flow. Once again, research is absolutely essential. Research is slightly different to the research you do for a traditional lease. Outsource as much as you can of the management. This is critical because, you know, it will do your head in otherwise. So basically we have systems to automate most of it, and we definitely outsource the cleaners, although I do train my own cleaners so that I keep the costs down. But yeah, that's a fantastic strategy. Okay, renovating to produce a deposit for your next property. So that's something that Well, certainly I've been mindful of, because we have young adult children, and certainly some of the people I work with, that's the same, it's the same deal. So the property I mentioned to you in Wynnum, I've actually partnered with a student who is actually, that's exactly what she's doing. And so that's why it's a flip, because she doesn't have the capacity to hold it. So we'll keep doing that until she's got enough money to be able to buy and hold. So this is the property that, so we set about doing projects with our kids to use our service, our cash and their loan to produce a lump sum that they can then go on and buy their first property. So you can do this where you put your cash in as or lend a deposit so that they can buy the property and then pay you back. But our problem was that this daughter did not live in the state, so she wanted the cash to go and buy her own property. Bought for $910, sold for $1.25, made a profit of $155, which we shared. So if you are renovating to sell, your level of finish is even more important. But you, of course, still need to manage the budget. So, when we were doing this project, the joinery costs just kept going up and up. It's one thing, when you find a great joiner that does a great job and is cheap, they'll be cheap for a while and then everyone finds out about them and then they get expensive. So the joinery the quote got up to about $19,000 for the wardrobes, kitchen and laundry, which was way out of my budget. So I got onto the internet and I found a high quality flat pack. So it's not a Bunnings or an IKEA. It's a sort of a custom flat pack. And so we were able to produce the joinery installed for just under $8,000. So that particular flat pack saved me about 10 grand. So being smart about it, is what really makes you the money. Once again, you have to know your market. So in most properties, ripping out the bath is a negative. But in this property, I ripped out the bath so I could do a sort of a showcase bathroom because I knew my market. My market was professional couples. They absolutely loved the bathroom, even though those black fittings, like, they're good quality, but they're sort of the bottom of the range. They're a budget range. So, but it's just really knowing what your market wants. Okay, just some figures to show you how that worked. So now Hannah has taken that on, that she took 100,000 of that and went and put it with her savings and bought a house. She and her husband bought their first home in Malvern East in Melbourne. And once again, they use the same principles that we use, and they bought a property. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and they're about to embark on a renovation that will convert it into a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. So that will significantly, they'll add at least 100,000 to, equity. So, once again, the principles hold us in good stead. This project is around about 3 weeks off being finished. So this is our second child. Once again, purchase price of $985. So once again, you need to know your market. Thankfully, the market in Bondi, in terms of renovations, is holding pretty well. So we've owned this for a year, and when I got the appraisal from the agent, he told me that he thought we'd get closer to 1.5 million for the resale. I'm just going to keep my estimate low until it comes through to make sure that we, get the return and don't get too over ambitious. Because if you start thinking that you're going to make all this money, often that will, turn on the tap in terms of the spending. Oh, I don't have to worry so much because, we've got all this profit, or we want to keep the profit for us. So that's that. So the good thing about this property, so this is its wow factor, the view, okay? Views certainly add a lot of equity, or, well, sorry, not equity because it's already got the view, but they add a lot of power to your reno. So, yeah. So another strategy, trying to get a deposit. This is not strictly a renovation, it's the exact opposite, it's a demolition. One of our students did this. She decided that she wanted some cash for her next, project. So she's been, I guess, crawling through RP data to find splitters that are on the market that she could purchase with an option, so without putting money in. She found this one. So it was on the market with a demolition, DA for demolition already, but people, when they looked at it, could not imagine the outcome because of the fact that the house was still there. So she actually demolished the house and made herself a cool $65,000 to add, to buy her next property. Tips on renovating to produce a deposit. So when you're selling properties, you should be aware that women buy houses. So you need to make sure that your property matches, it appeals to a woman. So that doesn't mean it's all pink and girly. It means that it needs to, so a few rules like make sure that your kitchen is predominantly white. Dream kitchen on a shoestring budget. So I talked a bit about how we did that. Appliances are another way that you can really, really go down the gurgler. And so we obviously buy appliances wholesale to, pay probably around about half what anyone else would pay for them. So really being smart about your renovation. Whether you're selling or holding, and particularly with high cash flow strategies, styling is absolutely essential. It will get you a higher sale price and it'll also get you a higher nightly price. If you're having trouble renting a property, styling will certainly get more people in to look at it. And so particularly with a rental property, if you're not going to put the money into furniture, you can virtually style it for a few $100s so that the images actually attract your market in to look at the property. So it's non-negotiable. Styling adds around about 10% to the value of the property, okay, or to the price. That's whether you're holding it or selling it, same deal. So, of course, you don't have to spend a huge amount with styling, but if you do happen to use a stylist, strongly recommend that you maintain control of the process. So I had a stylist style this room. My market was downsizes, and when I came back to look at it after she'd finished, she'd filled the living room with furniture. And downsizers, their big worry is, will their furniture fit? Well, it usually doesn't, and they have to get rid of it. But you shouldn't be sort of selling it to them that their furniture is not going to fit. Make the room look as big and spacious as you can. So not too much furniture. And the furniture doesn't necessarily need to make sense. If you, in a living room, traditionally you put in a sofa and maybe 2 armchairs. If you feel that you only want to put a sofa in so that you make the room look bigger, that's what you do. Don't feel that you've got to put the armchairs in just because that's what everyone does, because it's not about making sense. It's about, painting a picture and not creating buyer objections with your styling. The other thing is, with whether you're doing an investment property to increase the cash flow or a property to sell, then you should make sure that you work on blurring the lines between indoor and outdoor. So sell the dream, because these days an outdoor area is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Now, I realise that I'm going really over time, so I'm going to skip along so that I don't overstay my welcome. So tips for styling magic: don't give up control, create emotional connection immediately with your styling. It paints the picture. People want to live the dream. Okay. I'm just going to head down to my last slide. Okay. And just tell you that you absolutely can do this. Renovating is not rocket science. It's just a matter of having a system of rules to follow so that you protect yourself and so that you get a good outcome. Some of the things that you need to know are getting the right legal structure so capital gains tax doesn't eat up your profit. You have an easy system to follow and a recipe for the $1 million look. And so that's what we offer, and I'm just going to briefly go through that. Of course, you know, I try and do a super duper deal for Terry's cohort, and then I'll take some questions. So basically, how we work is we firstly help you plan out your hero's journey, where you want to go in terms of getting your strategy right. So a lot of people come to us, the first thing they need to do is do something with their own home, but we figure that out so that they don't tie themselves up and get bogged down with a lot of debt and can't move on. So, and then the steps you need to take to get to where you want to go. So what your dollar figure is in terms of income from your property. And we do this through our training, which is the Renovation Mastery Training, which is a weekend strategic planning intensive, where we you know, work with that plan and then teach you a system for getting high-end renovation at a low cost. We also have that program online as well. We have a suite of templates, checklists and calculators to help you with every step of the way, and support via the community and us. Now, so that program is $3,999. We also have an Airbnb program for people that are wanting to really renovate their cash flow as well. That's $999. But for people that want to register for our training, I'm going to give you that in with the renovation training. So I'd also like to give you a 30-minute strategy call so that we can start to nut out your path to where you want to go and what areas you need help in. And so, so that's a total value of $5,197. And so I'm offering that to you today until the 1st of September for $2,099. And if you would like to take me up on that, you can just email me on Bernadette at School of Renovating, and I'll be happy to help you with the next steps. Okay, sorry for going on too long.
That's okay, Bernadette. It's all good information, and I just remind people who have any questions arising out of the presentation or any questions at all, you can use the Q&A panel that you should be able to see on your screen and type in your questions, and I can put those questions to Bernadette on your behalf. Bernadette, a number of questions that have popped up during your presentation. Just that rule of thumb about how much you should spend on a renovation, and there is kind of a 5 to 10%, which means that if you bought a property for $500,000, you should spend no more than 5 or 10% of that figure on renovating, as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah. So if I bought a property for $500,000, I would, if I was planning to renovate it to hold it, and there was no real structural work in it, I would be keeping my costs down around $50,000 or less. If I was planning to increase the capacity in some way, I might be, doing some structural work to add another bedroom. I might be opening up the kitchen, onto an outdoor deck. That might go higher. If it's a unit, you probably should be looking at less. You should be looking at about 3% for an investment property, because you don't have all that outdoor work to do. But if you're, might be taking out a beam to open up the kitchen living area, that will increase the cost. You might go up to 6 maybe. So house 5 to 10, unit 3 to 6.
Okay, question here. If you're planning to sell your current home, is it worth putting money into a renovation if your style might not suit mainstream buyers?
So, so 2 answers to that. Depends on the property, what sort of condition it's in. So if you're planning to sell, I would firstly make sure that it is absolutely spotlessly clean and decluttered, okay? And if it does need sprucing up, then I would definitely put some money into it, but you need to be very careful about how much money you put into it and where you put that money into it. And absolutely style it. Like I've had people say to me, oh, you know, the project went over, and so I didn't style the property. I ran out of money to style the property. And statistically we know styling adds 10%, okay? So if you're selling a property for 500,000, you're going to leave, you know, around about 50,000 on the table to go and style it, okay? So not very smart.
When you say styling adds 10%, what are the main components of styling?
So, basically, setting it up in such a way. So, taking out furnishing it in a way that appeals to your market. Okay, and so that's a valid point. So, in terms of renovating it to your taste and not to the market's taste. That is a big problem with people renovating their own home. So what we say is you should always renovate to a broad market. That means neutral and contemporary, okay? So it's pretty easy to get it right once you know. So basically if I was selling my home, I would clear out all the clutter. I'd make every room look like it's from a magazine. That doesn't mean you don't that you have to get rid of all the furniture, but some of the crummy stuff, we've all got crummy stuff around, get rid of that. But you don't, beds, you know, you can just dress them beautifully. So a bedroom just needs a bed and side tables. And so a living room, you just need that neutral sort of sofa. You know, if you've got grandma's lounge suite in there, it's probably not going to cut it. And it's worth either hiring or I've actually styled properties straight off eBay. But you know, like people say, oh, they don't want it to look like a magazine. Yes, they do. People who come to look at properties have usually left something that they see as substandard at home and want to live the dream. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Another question, referring to an expression that you used during your presentation and wanting sort of clarification on what you mean by that, and that was you referred to the flow of the floor plan and the importance of that.
Okay, so when you're renovating a property, so I'll demonstrate. So the property that we have just bought in Wynnum, the front veranda has been filled in. So when you step in the front veranda, you're stepping into a room. It's a big room. But then the front door to the house is the next door you go through, and you go through that door and then you're in this pokey little entranceway. So there is it looks dodgy and it feels dodgy. And by streamlining that, taking the porch out and renovating so that the front room reads as a room in the house and not a tack-on. The kitchen, you can't get that sense of presence in the kitchen. Well, it's very hard with four opening doors on it. You can't get any consistency around it. You know, you've got to break up your joinery. And just by closing off one of those doors, I'll make that floor plan flow better. Things like, sometimes this is unavoidable, but bedrooms and bathrooms off living areas, you know, it's a bit like the rabbit warren. You want a nice flow. You want your bedrooms on one side. You want your living areas together if you can manage it. So there's a really nice flow and not pokey little rooms that don't actually have a use.
Okay, you mentioned a number of times about if you're time poor, outsourcing to skilled professionals. Were you referring primarily there to perhaps using a buyer's agent to find the right sort of property for you?
Well, yeah, definitely. And also obviously outsourcing the research. Definitely buyer's agents, yes. But there are good buyer's agents and not so good buyer's agents. So you need to be really careful about who you work with. And
presumably you use certain buyer's agents to find properties for what you do and recommend to your students as well?
Yep. Yeah. So like I would use, if I was buying a development site, I've got one buyer's agent for that. If I was buying in Queensland, I've got another one. And if I'm buying in the city, in a city, I have another one for that. So because it's really important that that person understands the area that you're working in.
Okay. Another question related to something you referred to, and that was the belief that essentially it's women that buy houses. Is that something that you find is that the prime mover or decision maker in a couple, in terms of who makes the prime decision is the woman of the party, or there needs to be appeal to the women rather than the men?
Yeah, so statistically, women, so they make the buying decision. So, but it, you know, like they may not be the person that has their signature on the contract, but they are the person that really influences that decision.
Okay. All right. There's many more questions that might arise, but we're probably out of time. Bernadette, people whose interest has been piqued by your presentation and would like to perhaps do a renovation or find out a little bit more about the possibilities, the first step would be to perhaps send you an email, the email address on the screen.
Yep, exactly.
And the special offer that you're making, where basically you're offering educational products normally priced at over $5,000 for just under $3,000. That offer has a time limit.
So we're offering that till the end of the month, basically.
Okay, all right.
And can I just jump in there? Anyone that has any questions that haven't been answered and you just want to ask a question, just go over to our Facebook page and ask it, and I'll make sure that it gets answered.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Bernadette, for your presentation. As always, really informative. It's clear that you have an enormous amount of knowledge in the subject of renovating for profit. At the same time, it's just brought home to me that there is a lot to know if you're going to do it well and get the best results, and that there are dangers for people who perhaps go into it with too little knowledge. And I think it's important for people who have been tuned into the presentation today to perhaps follow up and make contact with you and endeavour to learn as much as they can before they actually embark on a project, so that they have all the tools to go about it the right way.
Exactly. So thanks so much, Terry, and thanks everyone for being on the webinar today. I'll look forward to seeing your questions, and I wish you well. Okay, well, that's all we have time for. Thank you again, Bernadette Janson from the School of Renovation. This is Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au signing off. I'm sure you found that hugely informative. And for those of you who would like to follow up, please get in touch with Bernadette at the School of Renovation and find out a little bit more. Thanks for attending. Bye for now. Goodbye.